Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. Today on the program, government bracing for the impact of escalating tension in U.S.-Iran relations.
We have to move out immediately the Filipinos out of Iraq because I believe that this could be the target.
Seeking justice for the killing of Pinay OFW Jeanelyn Villavende in Kuwait.
First was September. She was calling the agency. Sinabi ko doon sa agency, dapat at that time, ni-repatriate niya na ako.
Also, Vice President Leni Robredo calls the war on drugs a failure.
Kung exam ito, ang magiging score ng ating pamahalaan ay 1/100.
The United States ban on Philippine officials involved in Senator Leila de Lima's detention.
Excuse me, we are a sovereign state. Do not interfere with our judicial processes.
And dealing with water concessionaires. Justice Secretary Menardo Guevarra joins us live. Thank you for joining us. I'm Pinky Webb. The government setting up contingency measures should there be a need to rescue Filipinos in Iran and Iraq due to rising tensions with the United States. Also, the family of the Filipino domestic worker Jeanelyn Villavende seeks justice after brutally killed in Kuwait. And later, is the war on drugs a failure? And we get to know more about the president's offer of new contracts to water concessionaires. There's too much to talk about. Let's go straight to the source of the story. We have him again, Justice Secretary Menardo Guevarra. Secretary, always good to see you. Maraming salamat po sa inyo.
My pleasure being here.
Okay, sir. You and the Iran, rather. Of course, this is breaking news targeting U.S. installations in Iraq. We have about, what, 7,000 Filipinos, sir, hindi lang OFW, Filipinos in Iraq and Iran. What's the Justice Department's role in all this? And maybe you can share a little bit more on the President's marching orders.
Well, the DOJ, through the Commission, or the Bureau of Immigration, rather, is the one who will make some control on the matter of Filipinos going to the dangerous areas. So it's really more on controlling the number of people who may go there to the possible war zones. Mm-hmm. So through the Bureau of Immigration.
So it's really the Bureau of Immigration, obviously under the Department of Justice.
Well, not the department proper.
Yeah, because, sir, if you talk about Iraq, that's a total deployment ban. And then now you have Kuwait. Let me just move to that. Kuwait, which has a partial deployment ban on first-time household workers. Sir, any update on Jeanelyn Villavende? Because I believe that OWA Administrator Hans Kakdak says that the remains of Jeanelyn will be arriving sometime today, sir.
I understand that the NBI will conduct its own autopsy on the body of the victim, so that we have our own independent investigation of what happened to our fellow Filipino in Kuwait. And the DOJ will also investigate whether there is any liability on the part of the recruiter.
Yeah. Secretary Bello had identified the name of the recruiter. I believe he said it's 5-star, if I'm not mistaken, sir. Mm-hmm. And there, of course, is that report, sir, that nagsabi na daw si Jeanelyn na she was not getting her salary and she was not being, she was being maltreated. Sir, what can how can the DOJ proceed in terms of having possible accountability on recruiters, sir? Kasi parang lumalabas pag pinadala na sila doon, medyo nakakalimutan na sila by some.
Yeah, that is very true. That's why we need to get this feedback, these reports from those who are actually there. And if they can pinpoint the people who recruited them, and there is ground to indict these people, to charge these people with violation of our laws governing the deployment of foreign workers abroad, then the DOJ will take the appropriate action to investigate and prosecute these people.
Where have you gone in terms of progress into identifying any culpability of the recruiter of Jeanelyn Villavende, sir?
Well, we have not commenced any investigation. We are just about to start this investigation because the body has to be autopsied. Although there has been some examination of the body made in or done in Kuwait, we still have to do our own.
In fact, it came out yesterday, sir, yung autopsy in Kuwait. Also, just to give an update on this, she died due to heart failure because of multiple injuries, and then hence was the NBI, the call for the NBI to conduct an independent autopsy on the body of Jeanelyn.
That's right, yes. On the criminal aspect, since this thing happened in Kuwait, it will be the Kuwaiti authorities who will have to conduct the appropriate legal proceedings. So here, we are really more after the liability of those who might have unlawfully recruited her or neglected her after placing her in Kuwait.
When will the investigation begin
As
on
soon
the
as
recruiter?
possible. As soon as
Possibly
possible, yes.
this week or maybe early next week,
Yes,
sir?
we'll have to coordinate with the Department of Labor and Employment, with the POEA, in order to be able to do what the DOJ has to do.
It's like, let me ask you this just directly. When can this possibly end, or have recruiters really look into the plight of the overseas Filipino workers that they send abroad? This is not obviously the first, this is not an isolated case. This has happened, maltreatment of overseas Filipino workers. Kailan ho kaya natin makikita yung araw na talagang may pananagutan ng recruiter at talagang, I guess what I'm trying to say is take care of our overseas Filipino workers once they're abroad, sir?
Well, ang tingin ko dyan, talagang maghihigpit lang sa implementation ng existing laws natin, which are, of course, being implemented or enforced by the Department of Labor and Employment, no? And its attached agencies like the POEA. Talagang kailangan lang maghigpit. At on the part naman ng DOJ, again, through the Bureau of Immigration, to make sure na human trafficking is reduced, if not totally eliminated. Kasi maraming nangyayari dyan na nakakarating doon sa mga lugar na yon because of some collusion or some illegal arrangements. No? So that's what we call human trafficking. Yeah. So on the part of the DOJ, yun ang thrust to ensure that human trafficking is minimized, if not totally eradicated.
And what have you done under siguro your term as Justice Secretary to minimize human trafficking, to put to prevent this, to kind of put a stop or reduce it?
Yes, marami na, no, because the Department of Justice is the lead agency in an interagency committee created by law. All right, that's the Anti-Human Trafficking Committee or Council. So, marami na yan. Very, very active yung interagency council na yan. And it has done a lot of things in terms of apprehending people na may kinalaman sa human trafficking, double-checking yung mga travel documents of some OFWs na, pretending to be working in a decent place, but actually would be ending in prostitution dens and stuff like that. Yeah. So, mahigpit ang Bureau of Immigration sa pag-check ng mga ganyan, pag-inspect ng kanilang documentation. If they see anything that would somehow indicate na possible victim ito ng human trafficking, in all likelihood, hindi sila makakaalis kaagad.
From that, I want to talk about the war on drugs. Vice President Leni Robredo calling it a massive failure. We'll find out what Secretary Guevarra thinks about this, and of course, other stories. We'll be right back. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, Justice Secretary Menardo Guevarra. Sir, Vice President Leni Robredo, part of the Interagency Task Force Against Drugs or Committee on Anti-Illegal Drugs, and for 18 days. And then she came out with a report saying it is a massive failure, sir. Your reaction to that?
Well, I cannot agree with that observation that it's a massive failure, because the positive effects of the anti-illegal drug campaign are palpable. That can be seen, for example, in the reduction in the rate of commission of crimes on the street. And I think most people would agree that there has been something done along that line. And also, from the point of view of prosecuting, apprehending and prosecuting what we call the big fishes. First of all, I'd like to say that currently, the total number of drug cases under preliminary investigation being handled by the Department of Justice, it's a huge number. Total cases being handled by our prosecutors at this time is something like 260,000 cases, all right, all around the country. And those that have been disposed by the court already, total, as of this time, something like 75,000 cases. And, no, I'm sorry, 85,000 cases. And of this number, 72,000, more or less, have resulted in convictions. That includes those convictions as a result of plea bargaining for the relatively minor offenses. So the success rate of the prosecution with respect to drugs is something like 80%, right, if we include all of these plea bargaining cases. Now, we're not only after those who are caught on the street peddling 3 grams and so forth and so on. We have also apprehended and prosecuted in court many big names involved in importation, illegal importation of dangerous drugs, smuggling through our Customs Bureau, and those who operated drug dens or shabu laboratories. We have cases pending in court involving these people. If you will remember, these personalities like Peter Go Lim, Kerwin Espinosa, Peter Ko, the Parauhinog siblings, Mark Taguba, Jimmy Guban, Chen Julong, the magnetic lifter cases, Asherto, if you remember, Fajardo, etc. Those are people who are connected big time with illegal drug cases. Of course, they have not yet been convicted, but their cases are already in court.
Pending. When you say 260,000 cases are being processed by the Department of Justice, this is from what, sir? What year to what year?
This
from
is,
the beginning of the war on drugs?
Yeah, from 2016, when the president took over.
Possibly to last
month. There were carryover cases, which we included in this total number. And
from
then,
the previous administration?
Yes,
okay.
And then plus those that have been instituted during the time that, or from the time that the President Duterte became president.
Secretary, how many would be a carryover from the previous administration?
Carryover is 191,000.
191, sir.
Yes,
so if it's 191, then you just processed 70,000 during your term.
75,000 more or less.
So is it right to include what was handled by the previous administration, because that was caught prior to the war on drugs of the president?
Well, we just want to demonstrate that these offenders are being prosecuted in court. They are being investigated by the DOJ and are being prosecuted in court.
But just to be clear, with the president's war on drugs, since it began, the number of processed cases since the war on drugs of President Duterte is 75,000.
Based on my data here, 75,000 more or less.
And you had named those big fish, those personalities that have come out in the news as well, sir. Let me point out what Vice President Leni Robredo is saying, which I'm not sure if you will debunk, sir. When you talk about shabu consumption, according to the Vice President, which was part of her press conference, sir, she had found out, not from the PIDEA, but from the Drug Enforcement Agency, head of the PNP, that every year there is a consumption in the Philippines of about 156,000 kilos of shabu every year. What was seized, according to her, is 1,344 kilos of shabu, which comprises more or less, sir, 1% per year. If you put that into numbers, that's 1.3 trillion pesos amount of shabu per year, and what was naipit ang ginamit niyang word, sir, by the AMLAC is 1.4 billion pesos from the year 2017 to 2018. Again, not even 1% of the drug trade. Would you believe, first of all, her numbers? Do you believe the numbers that she...
Really, I have no basis whether to believe or not to believe because, you know, these are estimates on consumption. How do you go about estimating consumption throughout the country of shabu? So how is that determined? Because you're talking about a percentage. Percentage of what base? So there is a base, there is an estimate. I cannot say if the estimate is something accurate or not. Maybe that may be true at a certain period of time when, drug consumption or shabu consumption was really very high, but probably that has changed over a period of time. So what parameters are we talking about here? So are we talking about a certain period then, and you're computing 1% of the estimated consumption during that time? Or is that something that prevails until the present time? We don't know.
Right. But that is her meeting with members of the committee when she had co-chaired this with Aaron Aquino, sir. And specifically, she said that there was no number coming from the PIDEA, but there's that number coming from the Drug Enforcement Agency of the PNP. That apparently is the number she's using. That she used during her press conference. If, for the sake of argument, sir, that that is accurate because she had said it came from the Drug Enforcement Agency, sir, what would you say about seizing 1% of total consumption? How would you describe a war on drugs that seizes 1% of the total drug consumption?
Well, assuming that the parameters are correct, talagang may kababaan yung 1%, no? But that doesn't mean that the whole campaign is a failure, because patuloy naman yan. It's an ongoing thing. All right? And as I said earlier, tina-target natin naman dyan yung mga nag-i-import, yung nagpapasok, yung may mga shabu laboratories and so forth and so on. We're targeting the supply of these illegal drugs. We are coordinating with our counterparts, law enforcement counterparts in other countries, because we need their cooperation. Yung alam natin na yun ang staging point, yung lugar na yon. So doon pa lang, we coordinate with the authorities there to prevent yung transfer or yung pagtransport to our country nitong illegal drugs. We're doing all of those.
But wouldn't it be important, though, Secretary, to find out indeed if this number is correct? Because it gives you a little bit of metrics and data. It gives you data really on how we are doing in terms of the success on war on drugs. Or if you don't even want to call it a success or a failure, how we're just doing fighting the war on drugs.
With respect to the data, we'll probably have to sit down with the source, with the PNP drug unit, to find out whether they have credible parameters.
Baka ayaw na makipag-usap din sa inyo, sir. All right.
Because we need to, as you correctly pointed out, we need to have appropriate data so that we can base our future action and strategy on the basis of parameters.
Do you feel, though, that there is merit in what the Vice President is saying, or some people are saying that masyadong nakatuon ang war on drugs sa small-time pusher at user at pusher, sir?
Hindi kasi hindi naman ganun Kasi na-highlight lang kasi yung mga, let's say, na-aresto or nagkaroon ng may napatay because of an operation conducted by law enforcement agents. Na-highlight yun every day, di ba? Sa tabloids, sa radio, etc., etc. Pero yung mga major cases na pinoprosecute at or ini-investigate, kuminsan hindi na nabibigyan ng ng attention kasi quietly being done naman yun But it's not as if nakafocus lamang doon sa mga maliliit na nahuhuli sa kalsada.
So the President said the Vice President is a colossal blunder. Sabi po ni Pangulo.
I don't know in what context the President said that. No, when you say colossal blunder, with respect to this report, he probably disagrees strongly, but it's just a matter of language.
But do you agree that, would you agree that it was prudent for the Vice President to have come out with this report, to end this discussion on the Vice President's role?
I'm not quite sure because she has been there for 18 days only, and I don't know if she was able to talk to the right people, gather the correct information, get the data that will actually reflect reality. I'm not quite sure about that. So because it has been
Should she have stayed longer? Should the President not have taken her out? So maybe she could have talked to more people and possibly have more resources and more sources, sir.
Yeah, but the President, I think, was rather upset by the initial actions taken by the Vice President instead of consulting with members of the ICAD. She consulted with U.S. Embassy people and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
So parang from the point of view of the President, mukhang parang the initial moves were rather incorrect.
All right, we'll be taking another short break. We'll be right back. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, Justice Secretary Menardo Guevarra. I need to talk about Senator Leila de Lima. Of course, sir, you have the 2020 budget of the United States. There's an amendment there in the budget. There is a prohibition of entry to those responsible for the wrongful detention of Senator Leila de Lima. Sir, reaction?
Well, the fundamental premise there is that there was wrongful
detention,
imprisonment of Senator de Lima. So that's where everything should start, you know, before you actually implement the actual travel ban of certain people from the Philippine government. The U.S. State Department must first be convinced that, in fact, the premise is correct, that there was wrongful detention or imprisonment. So everything starts there. So if they believe that, in fact, Senator de Lima was not given due process and that she was wrongfully imprisoned, then the State Department can start identifying and evaluating these people who might have, for whom credible information is available that these people had some involvement in this alleged wrongful detention.
You're saying that obviously there's no wrongful detention. The Supreme Court is saying there's no wrongful detention. But you have obviously the initiative of senators saying that you need to free her because there is wrongful detention, sir. Hence, napasama po yun sa amendment nung 2020 budget. So, to the people who initiated this, there is wrongful detention, sir.
Well, from their point of view, I don't know who's giving them this information, but apparently from their point of view, since they were the ones who sponsored the U.S. resolution, then it's clear that they really believe that there was wrongful detention. But that's why I invited, you know, their staff. Why don't you come over, examine the records, read the transcripts, observe the court proceedings, and tell us whether she is wrongfully detained. All right.
What did they say?
No reaction.
No reaction.
No reaction.
Who did you send the invitation to, sir?
Well, I made that public statement. I suppose that had reached the other side. I mean, the staff.
But there was no email coming from for example, the Secretary of the Department of Justice to the senators. Nothing.
Not at all.
There was no personal email. I invite you to come over and look into the transcript.
No, I just made that public statement because I was reacting to their own public statements.
So you have, so far, the Senator Leila de Lima says she has a list like Arya Stark. You know Arya Stark, sir?
I'm not following that,
okay.
but I read about it. I read about it.
Sir, she has a list of people she wants killed. So she has a list. She had mentioned the list before. This is Senator Leila de Lima. You have the President, you have Soljan Calida, you have Speaker Alvarez,
Aguirre,
and there, a DOJ Secretary. Aguirre. Sir, wala pa kayo dun sa initial list?
Because I was then not with the Department of Justice at the time that all of this were happening. I came on board the Department of Justice when trial was about to begin. So I was just taking over where former Secretary Aguirre left off.
If in the event, sir, that she includes you in the list because you are participating in her wrongful detention, as possibly she would call it, sir, how would that affect you?
I really don't mind. You know, it's a prerogative on the part of the U.S. government whom to bar or whom to allow entry. They don't even have to refer to all of this U.S. Senate resolution because that's their prerogative.
True.
They don't even have to, you know, to have a standard by which to measure kung papapasukin or not this particular person.
They can just bar you at any given time as we can.
They can just bar you. If they want to bar you, they can do so. In the same way that we have that prerogative. That's why we immediately barred the entry of these 3 U.S. senators.
Senator Leahy,
Durbin, and Markey. Immediately.
Yeah. So, in the event, sir, hypothetically, you're part of the list or you will be banned. How do you react? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Frankly, I don't give
D-A-M-N, sir. So, but you still have a visa. You have a
Yeah, I have a
US
visa. I have a visa.
Because, so you don't care whether you're banned or not.
I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care.
There's another facet to this, sir, because it's not just banning those involved in the alleged wrongful detention of Senator Leila de Lima. There is what is called, just very quickly, sir, the Magnitsky Act, which was also invoked by the U.S. Senate, which will include freezing of assets in the United States of those people involved in the wrongful detention of Senator Leila de Lima. It can go that far pala, sir.
Yeah, because I think that's part of that global Magnitsky law or something.
Wala naman kayong properties
No, certainly
sa America,
not.
sir. Okay.
And again, that's their own mechanisms. We cannot interfere with their own. Just in the same way that we do not want them to interfere with ours.
Is it a good idea then, Secretary, personally? Do you think it's a good idea when the President said, toying with the idea that maybe Americans will need visas to come here to the Philippines?
Well, on the basis of reciprocity, the U.S. has always demanded that Filipinos who want to go to the U.S. must obtain a U.S. visa. What's wrong with demanding the same from them?
Is it a good idea?
It's a good idea. Whether it's a good, well, we have to answer that in the context of what's happening. Under ordinary circumstances, probably that won't be really necessary. But given the circumstances obtaining, given the context in which within which the President made that statement, that's perfectly understandable.
Would you support it?
Yes.
Water companies, sir, the President saying there is a draft contract prepared by the Justice Department and the Solicitor General. Where's the draft contract, sir?
Well, that contract does not exist as of the moment in the sense that we have something like the original water concession agreement. We have simply prepared a matrix of what provisions we ought to be deleted because they're highly disadvantageous, if not onerous, to the Philippine government. And we have proposed certain improvements to make the contract equitable to both sides. If you will please take note that these contracts were executed in 1997.
During the time of FDR.
Yes, right. And at that time, we were just beginning to privatize. The government had no experience. The government's back was against the wall because the MWSS was in a state of disarray. So when this original contract was executed, you could probably imagine that this is an opportunity for the water concessionaires to put in whatever they want to be placed in there.
In other words, sir, the word would be incentivize companies.
Exactly.
Right. But
yes.
sir, before we go to that, where is that matrix? Is there any matrix there that you brought? No.
Not here, but I have something in my car, which was prepared by the Office of the Solicitor General.
I see.
But
They initiated it.
It's a joint effort on the part of the Office of the Solicitor General, the DOJ, the Office of the Government Corporate Counsel, the MWSS, and the Department of Finance.
Okay.
We are awaiting inputs from the DOF on the financial and economic aspects.
So, kailan ho kaya lalabas ng contract na to?
Secretary Dominguez told me that we may engage the consultancy services of certain ADB experts. So, to guide us on the matter of financial and economic aspects of rate setting and other issues there. So, I would say that maybe a period of 6 months would be probably enough para ma-firm up.
I see.
Oo,
It'll take that long.
Kasi,
It'll take that long.
Yeah,
6 months before a contract.
madali lang yun sa legal side because we just have to remove what we believe are illegal
Onerous.
provisions. Pero improving on the economic aspect, like putting more transparency in rate setting, what factors should be included, what should not be included in rate setting. This may be subject to further negotiation, but we need assistance from experts.
So I want to clarify this because we're trying to get a statement from Manila Water and Manila. A contract will be possible, the finalization of this contract will be possible in 6 months. How, is that correct, sir?
I guess so. That's my own personal opinion that we can do so within a period
However,
of 6
when
months.
will you begin engaging or speaking to the two water concessionaires?
Immediately. What do you mean? Engaging consultants?
Yeah, speaking to them and saying, okay, these are the possible onerous contracts. Yung medyo magkaroon ng preliminary talks, sir, on the possible onerous provisions.
I guess they already know what these onerous provisions are because they were given, I think, by the MWSS a copy of the DOJ's memo to the Office of the President, where we enumerated what we believe are highly
disadvantageous. Sir, can you tell us, just enumerate some to us, to the public?
Yes, of course, number one in my list will be that provision preventing or prohibiting the government from interfering in the rate-setting mechanism. So this rate-setting mechanism is purely between the water concessionaire and the MWSS regulatory office, which is a creation of the contract itself.
Okay.
All right, the government, the state cannot interfere. And if it does and causes damage or loss to the water concessionaire because ng delay or hindi na-implement yung agreed water rates, then the Philippine government will be liable to indemnify. That's why may Singapore arbitration rulings, which fortunately ay winave na nitong dalawang concessionaires.
But that's where I wanted to go, sir, before you continue with the onerous. I'm sorry, we're running out of time. Why did we allow a third-party arbitration committee to come in and side with Manila Water and Maynilad and then ask the government now saying, oh, that's an onerous contract? In other words, sabi natin, okay, payag tayo sa third-party mediator. Sabi ni third-party mediator, tama si Maynilad at si Manila Water. Tapos sasabihin ng gobyerno, ay hindi, mali sila eh.
O hindi, kasi yung provision about arbitration ay nahandun sa mismong concession agreement.
Right. That government firmed up in 1997, sir.
Correct.
So, pinayagan po ng gobyerno yon. Hindi na po ninyo, ng gobyerno yon.
Yeah, but what we're saying is those provisions are contrary to law. They are illegal. They are unconstitutional because it deprives the government of its power to exercise its police power. So, as far as this government is concerned, those are invalid provisions.
But if it's illegal and unconstitutional, government entered into a contract with these two water concessionaires. And if we go back, this was Ayala and it was Ben Press, sir. Hindi ba back in
Ben Press, yes.
My point, sir, is if you insist that it's illegal and unconstitutional, then what is the liability of the government that entered into this contract with these two water concessionaires, sir?
All right. If we are alleging that these provisions are highly disadvantageous and favored a private party, then those people in government and even the private individuals who might have agreed to this arrangement could be held liable for violation of the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act.
Who are they, sir?
Oh, they're quite a number, and I have a list that I don't know whether you want me to name them. But those were the officials who were running the MWSS at the time, the MWSS board, and then when the former MWSS administrator testified recently in the Senate, he said that President Fidel Ramos assigned a committee composed of the then Executive Secretary, the Secretary of Justice, the Secretary of Finance, and the Office of the Government Corporate Counsel to constitute themselves into a team who will negotiate and execute this concession agreement.
So sila yun?
Sila yun. If, some people will be minded to file a complaint for violation of the anti-graft. So, plus the private individuals concerned dahil kasama sila doon sa agreement.
So, sir, rate setting, sabi niyo po, what else are the onerous provisions that you want to change?
Doon sa rate setting, merong mga included dyan, certain business taxes, commission fees, debt service payments, even cost of arbitration or appeal ay kinakarga as expenditures and are being passed on to the consumers. This is quite major. Under this agreement, itong concessionaire is treated as a mere contractor of the MWSS. They are not considered as a regular public utility. And because mere contractor siya, by agreement, by contractual arrangement, it can pass on the corporate income tax to the consumers in the form of the water charges.
Which is happening right now.
I think so. So we want that clarified, if not totally removed.
I see. But you're not sure if this is being passed on?
Well, I cannot really, because, you know, yung sa bills, may mga certain terminologies dyan na baka mamaya hidden under a particular item.
Just two things, sir. What do you say to investors who might be wary because government seems to, you know, when they are unhappy or deem that a contract is onerous, they will just say, you either take this or you leave it?
No, they should not actually be scared, because what we are coming up is a much better agreement, an agreement that is equitable to both the government and the concessionaire and for the benefit of the public. It's not something that will kill the enterprise. So this is not something like a gun that you put in one's head to kill that person. No. It's a much improved, much better concession agreement, more equitable.
Yeah.
And to that extent, I guess any foreign investor would see that this may be a good thing.
And, but the President was saying also that if they don't take this, government will take over. But as a last question, sir, if government handed this over to the private sector in 1997, how can this government now assure the public that they'll do a better job in the event that it is handed back to government?
Well, there's no assurance. You know, in case of a temporary takeover, the government itself will be the one to run it. Now, whether it be MWSS or, as the President said, the military can operate it. We don't know whether that can be really, you know, something effective or efficient. The other way is really to take ownership from the private concessionaires with payment of just compensation in the interest of national welfare or national defense as provided for by the Constitution. In which case, if the government, upon payment of just compensation, transfers ownership from the private concessionaires to the government, then the matter can now be open to other players
to come in. All right.
Yes.
So we've run out of time. I wish we had more time, but we don't. Justice Secretary Menardo Guevarra, sir, maraming salamat. Always a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. We now go to CNN for their coverage on the ballistic missile fired by Iran against U.S. forces in Iraq.
Reminder, we're live at the 11 o'clock hour.
So you're not sure about the income taxes?